In this lesson, you will learn some basic tools of Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator, which will be fundamental to begin developing your stream package. So here in Photoshop, I have created a composition here, a canvas. To do this, you're going to go ahead and create a file, new. I created a custom here, so I did 1920 by 1080 of resolution of size. Here 72 resolution, and then the rest you can keep default or keep this way. So RGB color, 8-bit. Make sure you keep this in pixels, and here in pixels inch. And then go ahead and click create. You'll create a canvas like this one. So here I want to explain a little bit about the pen tool, because it will be fundamental for the creation of the shapes that we're going to use. We use these shapes for the creation of the alerts, of the panel. So a lot of elements, a lot of assets that are included in our stream package are made with the pen tool. So I want to explain a little bit how it works if you're not familiarized. So when we actually get to the production of the package, you know, or you have a basic notion of how it works. So here I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create a new layer. And then on the background and guide myself using the rulers. So if you press Ctrl R, the rulers will be right here, and then you can click and drag to the center of the composition. They will stick to the center here, and then do the same thing here. I already had it set, but here you have the center of your composition, and you can use the rulers to guide when creating your shapes. So here, for example, you can just mess around with the pen tool, try to create some shapes for your alerts. Or if I want to do this, you can also use the symmetry to create the rest of your shape. So for example, I did this shape right here. Let me just go ahead and finish this. So here, there we go. I have a shape here that I created with the pen tool. And then you want to complete it, you can just duplicate. So Ctrl J, and then go ahead, press Ctrl T to manipulate it, and then flip horizontal here. You can use the symmetry to create your shape right here. So here we have a shape that we could use for our alerts, for example. You go ahead and press Ctrl E to merge these two items together, and there you go. You have a shape. So it is also very important that you keep the pen tool here in this shape option here. You also have the path option, but you want to keep this as shape, because then if you choose the direct selection tool, here I'm pressing Ctrl H. If you're using the direct selection tool, you can select all the points that you've created and manipulate them individually here. So for example, if I want to do this, I can manipulate our shape and create different things. So it is very important to keep the pen tool in this shape option here. Let me go back to the original design here. I'm going to go ahead and show a little bit of the layer styles that we use in Photoshop and how you can create different effects using layer styles in your shapes, in your text. So here, let me go ahead and hide the rulers. So Ctrl 8, and then I'm going to go and double click this layer here, my shape layer. And then you're going to see all of these options here for layer styles. So you have different styles that you can create inside your shape to give a desired effect. So for example, one that I use a lot is inner shadow. I usually keep the blending mode in overlay, opacity in 100%, distance in 2 pixels, and then all the rest to 0. And you can see that I created a shadow here on top of my shape that looks like a highlight. So this creates kind of a metallic look. It gives some depth to our shape. So this is one of the layer styles that I use a lot to create this depth to my alert. Another one that you can use, you can mess around, is this one right here. By using this, you can control how dark it is inside of the shape. You can control here the distance, size, and you can also create a really nice metallic feel to the shape. Then here you have outer glow, which you can apply to our shape. Drop shadow. So the ones that I usually use the most are inner shadow. Sometimes I decide to use stroke to create this nice kind of highlight here. I usually use this inside the shape and then keep it to overlay. And also inner glow here, I also use in some of my projects. So I recommend that you go ahead, create a shape and try experimenting with the different layer styles and see the effects that you can create and see the ones that you like the most. I usually use a stroke, inner shadow, inner glow, also this one right here, and outer glow. Sometimes around like this, and I think it creates a really nice effect. Let me change to blue. So you can see how our shape is using much more color contrast now and how it stands out really well when using the layer styles. So if you go here and disable the effect, you can see our flat shape here with just the color overlay, just a basic color, and then after the effects that we used with the layer style. So you can see how different it looks. So now that you know a little bit more of layer styles, the one that I use, the effect that they give to our shape or our text, you can use this in every layer that you want. So it doesn't need to be necessarily a shape. You can apply this to your text. I'm going to show it to you here. After I explain about blending modes, I'm going to go ahead in this project and show the layer style that I used in the text, the layer styles that I used in the shapes, and also the blending modes. But now, just so you have a basic notion, I'm gonna go ahead and explain a little bit of the blending modes. Here, I have my brush tool. If you press B, here's the brush tool. I usually keep it the soft round brush. And then if you press Alt and right click, you can control the diameter of your brush. So here, what I want to show right now is how I do the highlights, how I place my lights, and how I use blending modes to blend the lights into the whole composition. So here, let me delete this. I have this layer right here. If I click with my brush, you can see it creates this strong light effect with the soft round brush. So you can use this to create some lighting to your composition, for example, like this or like this. This is a very useful tool that you can use to create lighting, to create final effects, and it just gives a really nice effect to your composition overall. So here, this looks very flat because it's not blending with the rest of our layers here. So it's not doing anything to this layer that is right below it. So what you want to do is go ahead and mess around with the blending modes that we have here. So you can see as I change the blending mode here, the way that the light is blending with the shape changes. So the ones I usually use the most to create light effects are lighten and screen. Usually these give some really nice light effects to our composition. So here you can see how it changed from normal and screen and how it works with their shape here. You can also go ahead and create a clipping mask, and you can see that now it is inside our shape and how it works inside our shape. Because we have these effects here, it is going to work differently if it wasn't in a clipping mask, for example. But here you can see how it is working with our shape. You can create different highlight effects, for example, if you want to do this. And then you can also control the opacity so it's not very bright. And you can create a kind of a glow effect that looks really nice. So for example, if I want to do this, it created a really nice glow effect here in these borders of my shape. So now to illustrate this in an actual project, I'm going to go ahead and show it to you how I used blending modes and layer styles here. And also I created my shapes for this composition using the pen tool just like I showed you before. So you can go ahead and see if I do this. So here I created a new layer, and then here clicking with the pen tool, you can see that I can create my shapes. So for example, something like this. And then it is very important that you use your rulers, you use guides so you know where you're going with your shape. So here, if you also want to change the fill of your shape, and then I'm gonna use no fill and no stroke for this, just so you can see only the path of the shape. So here, and you can guide yourself using this. And there you go. You created a shape. You also want to change here the fill so you have something inside the path that you created. And also I want to mention here real quick that if you click and drag, you can make curves. And also if you click and press shift and click again, it will keep a straight line when you do your path. So here in this project, I want to show layer styles and blending modes working in an actual stream package, just so you can have an example, just to illustrate what I showed before. So here in my Final Effects folder, I have a lot of lights that I use to give some depth to the package, give a nice contrast as well. And here I mainly have brushes, just like I showed you before, the technique that I used before. So here, for example, with this color, I have brushes, and then using the blending modes, I can create this highlight to the places where I want to create this highlight. So for example here, I have this brush set to normal. I'll go ahead and set to screen. Gives this really nice glow effect. and then set the opacity to 20%, for example, and it creates this highlight here. So basically I did this for every light that I have here. You can see I use different effects. For example, here I have screen because I thought it would work best for creating highlights in this area. Here I have it set to lighten. So I just recommend you go ahead and try creating shapes, try using the brush tool and creating these lights and messing around with the blending modes, and also trying different layer styles. So here you can see all the lights are basically created using that technique that I showed earlier. And here I have some particles which are stock footage. So here, before we actually go to the websites where you can find stock photos, I want to show you just the layer styles that I used here in this text, because you can also apply layer styles to text, and show how I created this metallic feel. Here I have a clipping mask on the text. Right here, if you see release clipping mask, I have this effect that I used creating brushes. So for example, I can do this, and then if you create a clipping mask, you'll see how it applies to the text. It is very important that you don't have any layer styles with color overlay, otherwise the color will take over, so you won't be able to use this technique here. So let me cancel, disable this, and click OK. And then you can create this kind of shadows and highlights to your text by using this technique of brushes. So here, for example, that's a very nice technique that I use to give some depth to the text. And also here are the layer styles that I used in this text that I usually use. So here I have this drop shadow, creates this nice shadow here. And then I used inner shadow, the technique that I showed earlier, to create this metallic kind of 3D text. And you can go ahead and you can mess around and try different things. So for example, stroke, I can give this effect to my text, which is really cool. The blend mode is overlay. So overlay is also really nice and useful blending mode. You can try different things such as this, create different styles, different effects to my text. So I recommend you go ahead and you try and you experiment with these different layer styles and blending modes. I just want to mention that you need to be aware of some Photoshop effects that don't work on After Effects. So just make sure you're optimizing your file for different softwares. Make sure everything is well organized into groups like this. So for example, if you use a gradient map here, After Effects won't import it. So this is also one thing that you need to know. I wanted to show you a couple of websites that I usually use to get textures, to get images, particles, all this kind of stuff. So here I have Unsplash and Pexels. Here in Unsplash, for example, if you search for texture, you can find all sorts of textures and different backgrounds that you can use in your text. So for example, if I want to use this texture here, which is a really cool fluid effect, you can go ahead. You can save the image, you can download just for the sake of the video. I'm going to copy it really quick and then go ahead to Photoshop. And here you can do something like this. So I'm rotating it and applying a clipping mask here in my text. So you can see how you can use different textures, just like I used a carbon fiber texture here. Using images and using them in clipping mask, using them in your shapes or your text is also a really powerful way of creating a nice, cool effect. So for the last thing that I want to mention and show you for this class, I'm going to go ahead and open Illustrator here. In Illustrator, I want to show how the pen tool works. It's pretty much the same, but just so you can see, and also show how you can create custom shapes using the Pathfinder tool. Here, I'm going to go and create a new file. Same thing as Photoshop, File, New, and then same thing here, Create. And then here I have a white canvas where I'm going to show the pen tool is right here. It is also the same shortcut as Photoshop, which is P in your keyboard. So here, it works the same way. Sometimes it is easier to use. So if you prefer to use this in Illustrator, it's totally fine. So here, for example, I have created a shape. I'm going to set my stroke to nothing and my fill to black. And then if you have both softwares open, you can go ahead, press Ctrl C in this shape, go to Photoshop and press Ctrl V here. And then it gives these options. You choose shape layer and OK. And same thing here, it will be imported as a shape and you can add it the same way as you do in Photoshop. So if you prefer to use the pen tool in Illustrator and then import it to Photoshop, it's totally fine. And the one thing that I want to show you here in Illustrator that is a nice option to use to create custom shapes. I use this, for example, to create my webcam frame, my webcam border. So here in the rectangle tool, I'm going to click and choose this size right here by 720. And we have a rectangle here, which we're going to use for our webcam frame. The technique that I used is I go to Object, then here in Object, go to Path, Offset Path, and I usually choose a value between 10 and 15. For this video, I'm going to choose 15. What this is going to do is create either a thinner or a thicker outline for your webcam frame. So here I have 15 pixels. I think this works well. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then inside your layer, you have the two rectangles here. By pressing Shift and clicking here to target, you can select both rectangles and then go ahead, click on Window, Pathfinder. You have your Pathfinder tool here, or you can also go to Properties and it is right here. And then if you have both of your rectangles selected, you have different types of shape modes here that you can choose. So for this example, I like to use the minus front. So here you can see that the inner rectangle was subtracted from the outer one. And then you created this border for your webcam, which is also a shape that you can manipulate if you want. So here, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Control C to copy and Control V to paste here in Photoshop. And you can paste this as a shape layer, which you can use to create your webcam border. So this is all that I wanted to show for this lesson. I want you to keep in mind that you can create different shapes. You can experiment, try different layer styles and blending modes to find the effect that you want to create and the shapes that you want to create. So now that you know a little bit more about Photoshop and Illustrator, next lesson we will be heading to After Effects, so I can show you some basic tools and some techniques that might be useful to you. For the next step, you'll be introduced to Adobe After Effects, which will be used to animate the static package.